Hello and welcome back. Hope you all had a good Christmas and are having a happy Hanukkah. And if you're watching the World Juniors, obviously you know that Latvia enjoyed themselves and had a little bit of a late Christmas last night, beating Canada in a shootout. But if you're Canadian and you don't want to talk about that, then sit back and relax as I'll break down the fantasy schedule for Week 13. Then we'll look at some of the hottest players in fantasy right now and some of whom you can actually own. And then lastly, we'll look at the filtered player hub just for teams with 4-game weeks and look at some of the player ads for this week upcoming. So let's do what we always do and start it off by looking at the schedule for Week 13. And we're back to a little bit more of a normal week. 51 games this week. Only 2 teams play twice. You're looking at Ottawa and LA down at the bottom. Only 2-game weeks for those guys. But with that said, 8 teams have a 4-game week, so you can definitely find some volume this week. The light nights, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, Sunday, back to the normal Monday, Wednesday, Friday, Sunday light night schedule. Only 1 game on Wednesday, so that's going to be important to note. None of these teams play on that game or on that night, but we do have a couple of teams with 2 light night games. You've got these 3 at the top with 2 light nights. The Rangers playing Monday and Sunday. You've got the Ducks playing Friday and Sunday, and then you've got Nashville with Monday and Friday. So a couple of different staggers if you're looking for different players. But just looking at this off the top here, I would definitely want somebody for this game, especially if you're looking for hits. There's probably going to be a lot of hits in this game. The Rangers desperate for wins and playing one of the best teams in the NHL, a team that they lost to in the playoffs. Then they've got a couple of winnable games here on Thursday and Sunday. This is going to be a tough divisional matchup. If you look at Anaheim, they've got this road back-to-back in the middle of the week. That's going to be tough. Even though one of them is on a light night, they play New Jersey. That's pretty much a guaranteed loss the way New Jersey's playing right now. And they've got Tampa to close it out on Sunday. So that's a very difficult schedule in terms of strength of opponents. For Nashville, though, it's even harder because they've got 2 back-to-backs with all 4 games on the road, and they're pretty much playing in Central or Western Canada. They've got Minnesota here, so in the central part of the U.S. and then Canada going back across the border twice. So a lot of travel involved. And this is a team that's starting to find some chemistry on the top line, but this is going to be difficult because none of those guys are owned up. Or I'm sorry, all those guys are owned up. None of them are available right now, so it's going to be harder to find some value on the waiver wire, but we'll break it down and find some guys for you. Then in terms of Winnipeg, you've got this back-to-back with a little bit of travel going to Colorado on Tuesday. And then their schedule eases up a little bit as they get Anaheim and Detroit later in the week. Detroit did get that coaching change, so we'll have to wait and see if they get that coaching bump. For Utah, they've got 4 road games as well. That's not going to be easy. And they're going in that Western road trip, so Seattle, Edmonton, Calgary, and then all the way down to Dallas. And that's going to be a very difficult road swing for them as well. They're pretty much riding Voronkov right now, so they're going to have to use their backup at some point. Jackson Stauber should get one of these 2 starts here, but Voronkov will get the 3 others, I would imagine. Then for Toronto, you've got a relatively easy week. This could be one of the best schedules, if not for the fact that they're on the heavier nights, Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday. But the Islanders are terrible right now, so they've got 2 relatively easy games there. Then you've got Boston, who's not playing particularly well right now on that Saturday. And you've got Philadelphia. That's a winnable game, even though Philly is scrappy and they do chip away. Have a nice forecheck there with Torts' system. So hopefully you can find somebody from Toronto. We do have one guy we'll mention later on in the video. For Carolina, they're rolling. They're actually not rolling. They were rolling a while back, a couple of months ago. They kind of hit a skid, 5-7 in the month of December, I believe. But now we're looking to get back on track. A game against Columbus. They've got Florida. That's going to be a tough game. This Minnesota game is going to be tough. Hopefully they'll have Eriksson Ek back by then. And then they've got the home back-to-back with Pittsburgh coming in on Sunday. Pittsburgh is no slouch anymore. They were at the beginning of the year, but they're not at this point. So this is going to be an interesting week for Carolina. And then lastly, we've got Boston. Washington's a tough opponent. The Rangers are not a tough opponent right now, but they desperately need wins. Toronto's going to be tough, and then a nice, easy game against the Islanders on Sunday. This should be an easy win. I'm very pissed off at the Islanders because I own Sorokin, so they've been driving me nuts lately. But with all that said, before we get into the players from these teams that have really good schedules and are hot, let's take a look and have a couple of quick shout-outs for guys who've been getting it done and find some of the top, hottest players overall in the league. Before we get into the trending players overall over the last couple of weeks, I wanted to mention a guy that I have previously loved in fantasy, Zach Werenski. Now, on this channel, I've mentioned a number of times in the past, there's only about 3 defensemen per season that can average above or at a point per game average. And right now, it's Makar, it's Hughes. Those are the 2 usual suspects. But now you have Werenski, 1.08 points per game, just had a 4-point game the other night. Really excellent shot volume, 3.6 shots per game. That's been his staple for years. The power play numbers are incredible, 98th percentile, almost half a point per game in terms of power play points. The blocks are 91st percentile. The only thing he doesn't do is hit. Imagine if he did that, he'd probably be as valuable as a Cale Makar or a Quinn Hughes, at least this year in fantasy. 8 points in his last 6 games. He's been absolutely dynamic. Did want to shout him out. Here's just a quick look at some of the top scoring defensemen. In terms of point per game average, you got Shea Theodore down here, who's been playing pretty well. His file's a little bit lacking in terms of hits and goal coverage. You've got a couple of other guys down here. We're not going to go through all of them, but I did also want to mention Lane Hutson, who's on a really, really nice pace. I believe he's on pace for 60 points this year and possibly the best rookie season in the last 30 years for a defenseman. 96th percentile in terms of assists. Power play numbers are great, 93rd there, and 78th in blocks. So just a couple of quick shout outs to some D that are getting it done. And if Lane Hutson's available on your wire, definitely go out and grab him. As we look at the hot players this week, or just in general, this is every team. In the next segment, we'll break it down by just the teams with the 4-game weeks. Did want to quickly shout out Patrik Laine, who is day-to-day. There's some, drama going on with his, with his comments in the media and everything else, but 5 goals in the last 4 games. Not sure why his hub isn't pulling up, but he has been incredibly prolific goal scoring wise, 8 goals on the year, and I believe only 10 games, which is crazy. But he's relatively owned up in the 60s. You also have Marchenko, who's one of the hottest players in the entire league. Actually, that's why their file's not popping up, because they're not D. So Marchenko, 40 points in 36 games, 13 on the power play, 12 points in his last 6. If for whatever reason he's available, go out and grab Kirill Marchenko right now. He's one of the hottest players in the league, and he's about 69% owned, so he might not be there for you in most league sizes, but if you're in an 8-team league or a 10-team league and he's available, he's definitely worth an add. This week, you can see here, rocketing up basically from mid-December all the way up now to the end of December. He's a must-own. He's top line, top power play, all that good stuff. Now, in terms of a deeper league add, you've got Jack Quinn, only 2% owned, single position right winger, and he's got back-to-back multi-point games going on right now, 1 goal, 1 assist in each. So 2 goals, 2 assists, 4 points in his last 2 with a power play point and 6 shots. So he's a goal scorer. He's hot and cold. He's younger, so he's kind of going through this where he's hot and cold and then, very cold for long stretches, and now he seems to be picking it up. His shooting percentage is still relatively low, and he is, as I mentioned, a goal scorer with 4 goals in his last 5. So I would expect this to continue for a little bit longer, and I would expect him to start scoring some more goals. Only 11 points on the season, 4 power play points. Buffalo picking up a couple of wins in the last couple days, so that's worth mentioning as well, that they're starting to heat up and they're starting to score in bunches of 4-goal period the other night against Chicago. So wanted to mention Jack Quinn as he's relatively low ownership. You also have Shane Pinto, who I did mention last week, and I don't, this is one of the reasons why I wanted to keep this video short, because there's not a lot that went on this week to change things, but Pinto only 8% owned. He's got a 2-goal, 1 assist game in his last 2, 4 shots in that span. He's got, 5 goals in the last, basically since December 13th, where you can see this starts to increase massively. So he's going to get you exposure to a team in Ottawa who's actually playing really well right now, and they find themselves, I believe, in a playoff spot right now. So that's interesting to note as well. Same type of thing going on for Voronkov that was going on for Marchenko. 10 points in his last 6. Really excellent 5 goals, 5 assists split. And he's a guy that you used to be able to go to for hits. Now he's not hitting as much, but he is scoring. He's 18% owned. He might be your best add in terms of who's hot right now. 10 points in his last 6, as I mentioned. He's on a 6-game point streak. So this is really excellent production. I had the option to pick him up last night. I thought to myself, there's no way he keeps this going, and sure enough, he did. So whenever I think that, it should probably bode well for you if you pick him up. So 6 power play points on the year as well. Shot volume is a little bit low, no hits or blocks, but he is really playing some good hockey right now. Single position left winger at 18% ownership. Another really good ad for you. We'll get into some of these guys in the next segment, so I don't want to touch on a lot of them, but I did want to bring up a couple of these guys, Quinn, Pinto, Voronkov. I wanted to highlight Marchenko, just in case they are available on your wire. But now, let's filter this by the teams that have the 4-game weeks and look at those. Now we're at the Player Hub. We're pre-filtered on all the teams that have those 4-game weeks. And what you can see here from the hot list is that there's a number of guys that are going really well. There's a couple of guys that aren't. This is a data anomaly. Natchez has slowed down a little bit. Same with Jarvis. But in general, we're looking at the hot list here because we want to add players that are trending right now. Now, this does take into account the winter break that they just went through. So maybe some of these hot streaks will come to an end. But with that said, that's what we're going off of today. And the first guy up here is Robby Fabbri. This is a guy that's coming back off of injury. He's always been a goal scorer, but he's never healthy. So that's the main problem with him. Center, left wing, dual eligible, 0% ownership right now, which is awesome. Great news for you because you can pick him up in every league size. He's line 3. He's power play 2 right now. 2 goals, 3 assists, 5 points in his last 5 games. 2 goals, 1 assist, 3 points in his last 2 games. So he's gotten back from injury and he's made it count. He also gets some hits. So 1.75 hits per game is really nice from him as well. So if you're in a deep league and you're looking for one of the hottest players that you can find with some power play exposure, Fabbri is one of those guys. Now, we just touched on a couple of the Carolina Hurricanes that are not going well. Jordan Staal's been playing pretty well. 5 points in his last 6. 1 goal, 4 assists, 5 points, 12 hits in that span as well. So he is a little bit more physical than some of his teammates. 1.46 hits per game on the season. Shot volume is low, not getting any power play time. So this file doesn't look great otherwise, which is why he's only 4% owned. But that shooting percentage is relatively low, 8.3%. He's only got 4 goals on the year, so I would expect him to start scoring. Just eye test. He looks like he's shooting the puck pretty well, and he's getting some chances. They're just not going in for him. So you could do a lot worse than that. And if you're in a face-off league, maybe that's the reason why he's got 4% ownership, because he does win a bunch of draws. So keep that in mind if you're in a face-off league. Now, your best ad for this week is probably going to be Gabe Vilardi in general. So 7 points in his last 4. But if you take that back, in his last 10 games, 5 goals, 9 assists, 14 points in those 10. He's line 1. He's power play 1. Power play numbers are 96th percentile. Shot volume is a little bit low for a guy who's playing in this role and playing this well. He does go hot and cold. He is hot now. He was cold before this, so keep that in mind. He's more of a multi-week streamer option, maybe not a season-long hold, but he is definitely worth a multi-week stream. Shooting percentage, anything over 20% is classified as extremely high. But for goal scorers, this could potentially continue, and he has been a goal scorer in the past. 14 goals on the year, 31 points in 36, and 14 power play points. So he's dual eligible, center, right wing, 51% ownership. He should be your number 1 ad if you're in a shallow league, and he is available. If you're not in a shallow league, if you're in a deep league, as we mentioned before, there's another option for you, and that's Bobby McMann. McMann, power play 2, but line 3, so maybe not the best assignment compared to previous times where he might have gotten a look in the top 6. Excellent hitting, 1.79 hits per game, 2.46 shots per game is nice for a depth middle 6 forward. Goal scoring has been decent, 9 goals in 28 games, 86th percentile there. He's a left wing, single position, 7% ownership. And in his last 6 games, 3 goals, 4 assists, 7 points. So that's what you're taking away from this. He wasn't in the lineup a couple games before that, so coming back in and now getting an opportunity on that third line with the second power play unit, making it count, 7% ownership. He should be on your radar in a deep league, getting you exposure to some of those guys in Toronto that you definitely want exposure from. But again, the caveat with that team is that most of their scoring comes from the Big Four. Now, another deep league target that you can add, Morgan Geekie, center, right wing, dual eligible. He's only 5% owned. He's got 3 points in his last 5, but you extend that out a little bit. He's got 3 goals, 2 assists, 5 points in his last 6, along with 12 hits and 2 power play points. So he's getting some power play time. Line 1 right now with Pastrnak, so that is nice to see, and he's power play 2. So getting a little bit of power play time. Shot volume is okay, it's just a shade under 2. Hits are good, 1.56 hits per game, and he does have a hell of a shot, like a really hard slap shot. So that might be why they're featuring him on the power play. So the goal scoring has been okay, 7 goals in 32, 75th percentile there. The assists are, a little bit lower, 7 assists in 32, 56th percentile there. But in a deep league where you're getting dual position eligibility, a guy who's getting you Pastrnak exposure and some power play time at 5% ownership, that's really nice to see. Speaking of Boston, you also have Elias Lindholm. He's been hot and cold this year. Obviously started out pretty hot and then just went on a huge cold streak all the way down basically to mid-December. And then he started to climb back up a little bit over the past couple of weeks. He's 38% owned, single position center, 3 goals, 3 assists, 6 points in his last 6 games with a power play point in there. He's line 2. However, he is power play 1, so you're still getting that Pastrnak exposure. And in a week like this where they're playing 4 games, you're definitely going to want to, if there's ever time to grab Lindholm, now would be the time to do that. Again, half a point per game isn't the best. Goals are not the best in terms of 6 goals in 37 games, 64th percentile there. Shot volume is very low for my taste, but he is hitting, which is nice to see, and he does get you some power play exposure as well. Moving on, if you're looking for some hits this week, there's a couple of options that we're going to talk about. The first of which is Will Carrier. So he's a guy only 2% owned. So again, another deep league play if you need it. 3.31 hits per game, 97th percentile, and he's a forward. So a single position left winger, getting you that level of hitting is great. And then on top of that, 1 goal, 1 assist, 2 points, 12 hits in his last 3 games. And that includes an 8-hit game. So he does pop off for those 5, 6, 7, 8-hit games every now and then. And he is pretty consistently hitting, so that is worth noting as well. So if you're in a points league where you get 1 point per hit, or if you're in a categories league looking to stuff that category, he should be an option for you this week at 2% owned. He's more than likely available for you there. But another option for you is Zach Leroux, who is getting you the same basic level of hits, so 97th percentile in terms of hits. Offensive production is a little bit low, 9 points in 31, but that's not that bad for a 4th liner. He's 0% owned, so he is available in every league format. 1 goal, 1 assist, 20 hits in his last 4 games. So he's another one of those similar to Carrier, a little bit of offensive production in the last week or so. And then on top of that, he's hitting everything that moves, which is nice to see if you're in a points league with hit weighting or a categories league and you're looking to stuff that category. Now, I mentioned earlier that Gabe Vilardi might be your best overall ad this week for a multi-week period, but Logan Cooley would be number 2 in my book, at least. 11.9% shooting is reasonable. He can continue this. He's not necessarily a goal scorer, 8 goals on the year. Single position center, 51% owned. And if you take this back to November 23rd, so you can see here 5 points in his last 5 games, but if you take it back to November 23rd, the last 16 games played, he's got 19 points. 5 goals, 14 assists, and 9 power play points. So you're getting him for that power play exposure, 91st percentile there. Power play assists are what you're going to get out of him. He does score occasionally, a couple goals here and there, but he is an assist-heavy power play guy. And sometimes you need that. I'm in a couple leagues. I'm in one of my category leagues. I'm dastardly low in blocks and power play assists. So I definitely could use a guy like Cooley at 50% ownership, 51% ownership. He's probably not there for you in a 12-team league, but if he is available on your waiver wire, that's going to be really nice exposure. He's in the top 6, I believe, and getting they kind of split their power play units relatively equally. I would classify the Sergachev unit as the number 1 unit, and I believe he is on that one. But speaking of the Utah Hockey Club, you also have Nick Schmaltz. If you can't get Cooley, you can maybe go out there and get Schmaltz. He's dual position eligible, center right wing, 24% owned, 2 goals, 5 assists, 7 points in his last 7 games, 4 power play points. So really nice power play exposure for him. He's also on the power play, one of those 2 units. And then what I was talking about earlier in the season with Schmaltz is that he was getting a ton of chances and not scoring. He had 0 goals on the season up until a couple of weeks ago, and then he did break out. He had 4 goals in 3 games. Took a little bit of a break there after that. For whatever reason, he's just not scoring all the time, but he is scoring a little bit more now, 2 goals in his last 7. And then he's, 4 points in his last 5. So it's been relatively consistent, basically back here since mid-December. So a guy that I usually like streaming. This is a nice week to add some Utah players. And if you can't get Cooley, Schmaltz should be available for you. Now, another name to talk about in terms of hitting right beneath him, same Utah exposure here, Jack McBain. His shooting percentage was astronomical. It was in the 30%, 35%, I believe, a couple weeks ago, and he was scoring left, right, and center. He was 9 goals in 35 games. A lot of those came in that one bunch where he was scoring every night. But you're getting excellent hitting, 3.23 hits per game, 97th percentile there. And then on top of that, in the month of December, he's up that to 3.9 hits per game. So hitting everything that moves, 8% owned, center, left wing, dual eligible. He can score in bunches, so that would be the main reason to add him. He doesn't have any, 1 assist, no goals in the last 5, and you track that back a little further back, and he's not scoring the way that he was previously. But with that said, if you're getting him for the hits volume and you're hoping to get some offense out of him, odds are he will probably score at least 1 this week. So the high shooting percentage is worth mentioning, but he already has regressed about 10% from where he was just a couple of weeks ago. Now, looking for some D, there are a couple of D that we can talk about, and we'll start it off with Jackson LaCombe. He has been held pointless in his last 3 games, which is noteworthy because the 3 previous games, he had 2 goals, 3 assists, 5 points in those 3 games. He's top pair with Gudas, and he's power play 2, so that he's still getting a look. They have Zellweger on power play 1, and they have LaCombe on power play 2, which unfortunately edges Minchikov out, who had a really nice power play stat line last year. But with that said, LaCombe is a reasonably good option in terms of blocks, 1.77 blocks per game, 93rd percentile there. Shot volume is a little bit low. Power play numbers, he's got 2 power play points on the year, so it's a little bit low. Overall, under half a point per game, not the best, most dynamic offensive defenseman. However, he was relatively hot not that long ago. So if you're looking for power play exposure, you can pretty much find every Anaheim Duck on the waiver wire, except for maybe Frank Vatrano, who's at 66% ownership. But a lot of these guys are available, and we'll touch on a couple of them here. So you also have Gudas, who you know what you're going to get out of him, hits and blocks. 3.21 hits per game, 2.18 blocks per game, 96th and 98th percentiles there. And then on top of that, he's been getting a little bit of offense. So 3 assists, 13 hits in his last 4 games played. He's 26% owned. So he's your best hits and blocks option this week. Just in general, he should be owned up if you're looking for hits and blocks. And I'm going to have to scroll here and try to find Jacob Trouba. I don't know if he's actually on this improved list, but he's been playing pretty well as well. Here's Trouba down here. Trouba, since coming over to the Ducks, 2.75 hits per game, 3.25 blocks per game. So he's increased both of these averages since coming over to the Ducks. 100th percentile in blocks, 2.94 on the season, and he's up that in the last couple of games. So that's really important if you're looking for blocks and hits. He's going to get more blocks, whereas Gudas is going to get more hits. That's kind of how you break them down. But I would not want to be a team playing against these 2 guys, these 2 big physical defensemen, basically the Bash brothers from the old Mighty Ducks movies in real life. So that's important to note if you're looking for hits D. We're not going to go through every one of these guys. A couple of others that you can maybe look at. Schenn, obviously for hits and blocks, he's more than likely available. Very low shooting percentage, only 1 goal, only 2 points on the year, but 3.83 hits per game, 1.33 blocks per game. I'll have to take a look and see when Lazon is coming back, because he was the king of the hits per game on the player hub so far this season. But Luke Schenn, in his absence, is picking up the slack and has been hitting everything that moves. Not going to touch on too much other guys on this list. You can go and check out the rest of this list by looking at the link in the description below. But that's going to do it for this one. Let me know who you've got your eye on as we head into week 13. Leave those in the comments section below. Thank you again for watching, and as always, I'll see you in the next one.